Today we're talking about hiring for cultural fit versus technical competence, how to keep your team motivated during challenging times, and how to deal with an overbearing boss. My name's Dave McKeown and this is Lead From Anywhere. Hey everybody, Dave McKeown from Outfield Leadership here. Thank you so much for stopping by for this episode of Lead From Anywhere, where I take your toughest and most challenging leadership questions, obstacles and challenges and try to give you some advice, guidance and support on how to deal with that. This is your first time here, would love for you to subscribe to the channel or maybe hit that like button or hit that bell to ensure that you get notified when new episodes come out. And if you've got a question for me and you'd like to submit it for a future episode, just text it to me at 949-395-9490 or put your question in the comments below and I will be sure to get to it on a future edition of Lead From Anywhere. So we've got three great questions today that I'm going to take a look at. Let's get stuck right in with the first one. The question is, I've got two candidates, one who's clearly more technically skilled, but the other who seems a little bit better fit for our organization. Who should I go with? This is actually, it's a not uncommon issue that arises, and funny enough, one that we struggle with often, even though the answer is pretty simple. The answer is you've got to go with the one that has cultural or better cultural fit. And here's why. Technical competence is always going to evolve and change. You don't necessarily use the same systems, processes today as you did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even a year ago. Those will change and evolve over time. Cultural fit is a lot harder to make sure that you're matched with. You can teach somebody the technical aspects of a role fairly simply. It's going to be really much more difficult for you to teach how to have cultural fit. And so my answer is always, if you've got two pretty well matched candidates, but one edges in culture and one edges in technical competence, go with the cultural fit every time. Now, that's not to say go for somebody that has absolutely zero experience in the role that you're hiring for necessarily. You do want to ensure that they've got a background, they've got some experience there. But what happens often if you bring somebody in that's a good technical fit but is just out of whack culturally, they end up becoming either a bit of a maverick or they isolate themselves or wall themselves off, or worse still, they become really problematic and begin to bring down the culture in the team that they're in. So my suggestion, always go for cultural fit. Second question is, how do I keep my team motivated during these challenging times? And what a year it's been, let's face it, a real challenging time that we're all facing. And it seems to have its ups and downs as we progress through it. And I think there are three things that you can do really to help your team during any difficult time. First of all is you've got to ensure that you're casting a far enough and wide enough vision out there for what the future might look like. I know that's difficult in today's day and age because things change so quickly, and also because we're in the middle of a whole bunch of issues that we're trying to deal with. But there's something about having a vision that folks can attach to that gives them that sense of transcendentalism that helps them maintain a higher morale, a greater degree of meaning for them. Productivity often increases as a result of it. So even if you're not sure what the future holds, just taking a look at what the vision is for your team or your organization and ensuring that it's inspiring, it's exciting, it's long-term enough. You set that vision in the long term, and then you've actually got a next step is to really reel it all the way back into today. Help the folks in your team see how the actions that they take on a daily basis add up to achieving that vision, because that provides that connection for them, helps them hook into that vision in a real and practical way, so that they know if they're going to the meeting or taking the phone call or priority shift, they know why, because it's attached to that overarching vision. So cast a wide and far vision, reel it all the way back into today, try to connect those two. And then the third thing I think is just to have more and regular connections, touch points with your team on a human to human, adult to adult basis. That's not necessarily to talk about the functional aspect of their role, the technical aspect of their role, but there's really just more of a human to human connection point to just ask questions like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What are your biggest challenges at the minute? What are your biggest fears, worries at the moment? How can I best help? How can I best help you overcome those challenges? Just so that they feel like they're not on their own or isolated. Help them feel like they're part of a community or a tribe of people that are working through this difficult time onto something else. So that's it, how you can motivate your team during challenging times. Make sure you've got a compelling, exciting vision for the future. Dial it all the way back into the day-to-day, connect those actions to that vision, and then spend some time speaking with them in a non-functional capacity just to have that human-to-human check-in. Third question this week then is how do I deal with an overbearing boss? And I'm sure we've all been in that situation or circumstance, no matter how senior you get, where at some point there's somebody just hanging over your shoulder. They're just micromanaging everything that you're doing. They just got the squeeze in. It just feels like nothing's ever good enough. And here's the one thing that you need to be aware of and be clear of. The likelihood is, in 90% of all cases, that's an issue with them and not an issue with you. Quite often it comes down to their own ego, either them feeling that they need to be more useful or helpful, or that they have a sense of distrust in the work that you're doing, which, by the way, counterintuitively ties back to a subjective perspective that they have on what good looks like and what the quality of work looks like. The third thing is that often leaders, even in senior positions, often feel that if they don't somehow have their fingerprints or their handprint on the work product or what's going out the door, that somehow that they're not leading or they're not adding value. A lot of the work that I do with leaders is try to help them overcome that limiting mindset to understand that actually where they add value is in the medium and long-term direction of their team and the development of their people. So first of all, I just want you to just take a moment, take a breath, and know that if you've got an overbearing boss, it's quite likely not down to you. It's much more down to them. Here's the problem, however, they're still in your life. You still have to work for them. You still want to figure out a way to give yourself a little bit of breathing room. So the second thing that you've got to do is understand that you can control what you can control and that you can't control what you can't control. So at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to fully control or change their behavior. Now, there are some things that you can control, and I'll go on to them in a minute. What you want to do, however, is give yourself the best understanding of the context within which you're playing, the sandbox within which you are playing. Too often when we get into circumstances that we're not happy about, we either just sit and complain about it, we don't make a difference, we don't make a shift, we don't even attempt to do that. And so often our complaints are an illusion that we tell ourselves, and actually things may be a lot better, or we may be able to push up against some of those boundaries and parameters that we think that we're in. And so we've got to do a little bit of that poking and prodding. And to be honest, there's no magic bullet about this. It can be a little bit icky, but what you've got to do is go and sit down and have an adult-to-adult conversation with them. Usually best not to do this in the heat of the moment or whenever you're working through a bit of work for them. Usually better to do it either in a debrief session if you've just completed a bit of work, or if there's a lull in your workflow and you've got that moment to have a discussion with them. And I would always suggest teeing it up as an opportunity for you to improve how you work and for you to improve the relationship and how you work with your boss or your manager or your leader. And so I would go into a conversation prepared to ask questions like, what am I doing well? Because I think you've got to start with some feedback on that regard. What am I doing not so well? And give them the opportunity to share some of their perspective. That might shed some light for you on where they're feeling the need to have that degree of overbearance. And if they do, and if there's something really clear there and a light bulb goes off, that's great. Then you can work on that with them. You can say, well, how can we get to a point where you do have full trust in my capability or my ability to do this job, then together come up with an action plan that you can then work on. That's a great place to be in. If there's nothing that comes out, I do think that at some point then you've got to just push a little further and say, hey, can I share some thoughts just on how we interact with each other? Because I'd love to continue to work on that, improve on that. And then just be open and honest and share with them that there are times, and if you've got specific examples, that's better, where I feel like there's a degree of trust missing in how we're communicating. I have a sense that you have a need to be up to date on things that perhaps you don't need to, or there's a sense that I get the sense that you want to be involved in a way that kind of stifles my own degree of empowerment in what we're doing here. And I'd love to understand why that is. Is there something that I am doing or not doing that causes that to be the case, and how we might be able to move past that? You don't want to point the finger necessarily, come in hot and heavy and play the blame game, but what you want to do is be really open, honest, transparent, have an adult conversation that has some clear examples of where you think this is happening and the impact that it's having, not just on you, but the quality of work that's coming out the other side. You'll end up in one of two situations. Either they'll say, hey, you're totally right, I didn't realize I was doing that, let's work on that. And that's a great place, because now you've got their buy-in, you've got their understanding, you can begin to work on that relationship. Or you end up in a position where they either deny it, they get angry, they just don't see it. In which case, you know what? Now you know the parameters of the sandbox within which you're working. And at that point, then you get to make a decision. Is this a relationship that you are comfortable to maintain in, given those parameters, given what we talked about earlier, which is you're not going to be able to control their behavior? If so, if the plus sides of that are greater than the negative sides, that's great. You can continue to do that. If not, then you may want to then evaluate what your options are. So whether that's looking for a job somewhere else in the organization, switching teams, or maybe even looking elsewhere. So there you have it, how to deal with an overbearing boss. I know it's tough, I know it's not easy. And that's our 3 questions for this show. If you've got a question that you'd like me to answer on Lead From Anywhere, feel free to just send me a text at 949-395-9490 or put your question in the comments, and I'll be sure to take it on another episode of Lead From Anywhere. For now, I wish you all the very best on your leadership journey, and I hope to see you again on another episode.